Hello, and welcome back to Measuring Learner Data and Assessment. This is Week 2, Lecture 3, Creation of Assessment and Impact on Value. This lecture will focus on who creates assessments and the ways the value of those assessments change as a result. So who creates assessments? It's a good idea to view who has created the assessment when determining its value and whether or not it should be utilized. Teacher-created assessments. Teacher-made assessments can be used for any of the different types of assessment. I've seen them utilized as baseline exams for student learning objectives, which would be diagnostic, as midterm exams, interim, and as final exams, which would be summative. Teacher-made assessments are most prevalent as formative assessments. The small check-in activities that are a part of daily lessons tend to be the most useful when seeing whether or not the students are moving towards accomplishing our goals. Since we know the strengths and limitations of our own classrooms, teacher-made formative assessments tend to be some of the most valuable data gathering tools. How does that impact value? Again, as formative assessment, teacher-made measures are extraordinarily valuable. You know your class, so you can plan a formative assessment that addresses and meets their needs to a T. As other measures of data, the value can be somewhat fluid. Baseline assessments used as diagnostic tools are usually based on the measures that are used for summative assessment. So even though a teacher is making the tool, it may be based on something created by some other entity. This will impact the perceived value. The same can be said of teacher-made interim and the rare summative assessments. Many institutions outside of the classroom and/or school may not perceive teacher-made diagnostic, interim, and summative assessments as particularly valid or reliable. What about student-made assessments? These have a place too. Again, I would argue that they are going to be most valuable as a form of formative assessment. I have always been of the opinion that you don't truly know something until you're asked to teach it. By extension, it could be said that you don't truly know how to teach something until you can assess whether or not it's been learned. If a student can create their own assessment on a topic, it will be valuable in expressing their level of understanding. District-created assessments. District-made assessments will be most useful as interim and summative assessments, as long as the course doesn't have a state-mandated summative assessment attached. They can also be used as diagnostic assessments in some cases, although, as stated before, since they will most likely be based off of summative assessments created by others or elsewhere, they may not be that aligned to individual needs. One area that district-made assessments would not be useful is in the area of formative assessment. A district may suggest, or in some cases mandate, an amount of formative assessment that should take place, and they might even suggest methods for formative assessment. But to create blanket assessments for formative use would be counterproductive, since they would not be geared to the class itself. So what's the impact on value? I would argue that the further away from the students the people creating the assessments are, the less value it will have. Unless the district is allowing, paying, their teachers to collaborate and create these assessments, it will be hard to align catch-all measures with actual classroom and student needs. State-created assessments. Use. These are going to be used as summative. State assessments are usually used as final exams, like the Regents exams of New York State, and seen as markers of progress towards commencement. The impact on value? The value of state assessments being utilized is that they guarantee, as much as possible, that schools statewide are adhering to state standards at all levels. It can be argued that value decreases as more outside standards are introduced and the assessment becomes beholden to multiple masters. company-created assessments. These will be most useful as diagnostic assessment. Most special education teachers know already that diagnostic exams are utilized throughout the different areas of assessment: educational evaluation, psychological evaluation, speech, OT, and so on, in the classification and monitoring of students with special needs. But what about the other well-known company-made assessments, the SAT, the ACT, etc.? Although others might argue that these are summative assessments, as they tend to take place towards the end of high school, I would categorize these as diagnostic as well, since they are used to determine placement in post-high school educational endeavors. Other company-made diagnostic measures can be used to help determine placement in vocational programs and in guidance towards future job prospects. What's the impact on value? Using company-made assessments can be a double-edged sword. While they tend to be some of the most valid and reliable, in terms of definitions we'll discuss next week, they can also be problematic in terms of connection to the student. What does this mean? Since the company-made assessments are designed to be standardized to a grade level or age level and be utilized on a nationwide basis, they do not take into account local aspects or understandings that a student would need or might lack in order to understand certain items. For example, a student taking an assessment in a large metropolitan area might not understand questions regarding farming or rural life. This can be seen as a type of bias, which will be discussed in more detail in week 3. We've discussed before how the type of data being collected, the type being used, and the purpose all should play a role in determining the value and use of any assessment. It follows that the source, and all the connected factors therein, should also be a determining factor in any educator's choice of assessment.